Close your eyes and let the world around you begin to fade. Breathe in deeply, feeling the gentle rise and fall of your chest, and imagine a stillness washing over you like the softest of waves. In this moment, you are about to embark on a journey, not one of urgency or haste, but one of calm exploration, where every step is taken with intention, and every experience invites wonder. This is the story of Nellie, a writer seeking inspiration for her next novel. Drawn to the timeless charm of Hanoi, a city where history and modernity intertwine like the roots of an ancient tree, she sets off to discover its secrets. Through its bustling streets, serene lakes, and sacred temples, Nellie meets kindred souls who guide her along the way, their voices as soothing as the breeze that rustles through Hanoi's weeping willows. As you follow her journey, let each chapter unfold like a gentle melody, carrying you deeper into the tranquility of her experience. Picture the vibrant streets of Hanoi, where the aroma of pho mingles with the laughter of children. Hear the rhythmic creak of wooden looms in a silk village or the distant rumble of a train as it passes through narrow streets lined with life. See the golden glow of lanterns reflected on still waters and feel the warmth of friendships that blossom in quiet moments. This is not just a story, it is a guided meditation for your mind. As you read, allow yourself to slow down. With each page, let your breath grow softer, your body lighter, your thoughts quieter. Let Nellie's journey inspire your own sense of stillness and connection, preparing you for the restful embrace of sleep. Tonight, let Hanoi be your dream. Let its lakes and temples, its myths and melodies, lull you into a serene and restorative slumber. And as you drift into sleep, know that the city's gentle hum will stay with you, a reminder that beauty can be found in the quietest corners, and peace is always just a breath away. Now, let's step into the story and begin this peaceful exploration. Chapter 1. Nellie stepped off the plane into the mild, misty warmth of Hanoi's autumn. The air carried a faint aroma of earth and rain, mingling with a distant hint of spices that made her mouth water. Pulling her scarf tighter, she took a deep breath and smiled. This was where her journey would begin, a place she hoped would unlock the creativity she had been chasing for her next novel. Her notebooks were tucked safely in her bag, empty pages waiting to be filled with inspiration. Outside the terminal, she hailed a taxi. The driver, an older man with a kind face and a weathered cap, greeted her in English. "First time in Hanoi?" "Yes," she said, settling into the back seat. "I've heard so much about this city. I wanted to see it for myself." "You will love it," the driver said, weaving through the bustling traffic. Old and new, all in one place. The streets soon grew narrower, more vibrant. Nellie's gaze darted from the motorbikes buzzing past to the small shops with colorful signs in Vietnamese. They entered the old quarter, a labyrinth of lively streets where vendors sold everything from fresh herbs to painted silk fans. The taxi stopped in front of her hotel, a cozy building with weathered shutters and a small balcony draped in potted plants. After checking in, Nellie left her bags in her room and ventured back out. She wanted to walk, to feel the pulse of the city. The streets were alive with the chatter of vendors, the sizzling of woks, and the occasional clink of bicycle bells. She found herself drawn toward Hanoi Lake, its serene waters reflecting the crimson leaves of autumn trees. A red bridge arched over the lake, leading to the Naksun Temple, its entrance guarded by stone dragons. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Nellie turned to see a young woman standing nearby. She was holding a basket of flowers and smiling warmly. "Yes, it's lovely," Nellie replied. "Do you live here?" "I do," the woman said, extending a hand. "My name is An. I sell flowers here in the mornings, but I also guide visitors. If you need someone to show you the city, I would be happy to help." Nellie hesitated. She liked to explore on her own, but An's sincerity won her over. "All right," she said. "Can you tell me more about this lake?" An's face lit up. "This is Hung Kim, the lake of the restored sword. Do you know the legend?" Nellie shook her head, intrigued. An began, her voice weaving the tale with ease. "Long ago, Emperor Luloi was given a magical sword by a golden turtle god to defeat his enemies. After his victory, he returned the sword to the turtle in this very lake. That's why you see the turtle tower in the middle of the water." Nellie followed An's gaze to the small, weathered tower on an island in the lake's center. The story stirred something in her, the kind of mythic resonance she longed to capture in her writing. "Do you want to visit the temple?" An asked. "Yes, I'd love to." An led the way across the bridge, its red paint vibrant against the green of the water. Inside the Naksun Temple, Nellie marveled at the intricate wood carvings and the quiet reverence of the space. An pointed out the preserved specimen of a giant turtle, said to be from the lake, and Nellie couldn't help but imagine the stories that had been told here over centuries. As the afternoon wore on, Nellie felt her stomach rumble. An grinned. "You must be hungry. Come, I know the perfect place." They walked back through the old quarter, the streets now glowing with the golden light of the setting sun. An led her to a small food stall tucked between two buildings. The smell of simmering broth wafted through the air. "This is pho," An said, handing her a steaming bowl. "The soul of Vietnamese cuisine." Nellie took a sip of the fragrant broth, her eyes widening at the depth of flavor. "This is amazing." An laughed. "Good food makes everything better. Now, do you like coffee?" "I love coffee," Nellie replied. An's smile grew mischievous. "Then you must try egg coffee. Follow me." They arrived at a tiny cafe, its walls adorned with old photographs and shelves of books. An ordered 2 cups, and soon, a waiter brought over a frothy drink that smelled of vanilla and caramel. Nellie hesitated before taking a sip, and then let out a small, contented sigh. "It's like dessert and coffee combined," she said. "It was invented here in Hanoi during a time when milk was scarce," An explained. "They used egg yolks instead, and now it's a tradition." As the evening deepened, Nellie and An sat by the window, the hum of the street below blending with the soft music playing inside the cafe. They talked about Hanoi, its history and its people. on shared stories of growing up in the city, her dreams of becoming a teacher, and the joys and challenges of daily life. Nellie, in turn, spoke of her love for writing and her hope that this trip would reignite her creativity. When they finally parted ways, Nellie felt a profound sense of connection, not just to On, but to the city itself. As she walked back to her hotel, the streets quieter now but still alive with the occasional clink of a bicycle or a vendor's last call, she realized that Hanoi was already beginning to shape her story. Back in her room, Nellie opened her notebook and wrote her first words. *, the city hums like an old melody, familiar yet new. Here, even the air seems to tell a story. Satisfied, she closed her notebook and climbed into bed, her mind swirling with images of red bridges, golden turtles, and steaming bowls of pho. Sleep came easily, carrying her dreams deeper into the heart of Hanoi. Chapter 2. The morning sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of Nellie's hotel room, casting a soft glow over the small desk where she had left her notebook open the night before. She stretched and felt a rare sense of energy, the kind that came from being in a place where every corner seemed to hold a story. After a quick breakfast of crispy banh mi stuffed with eggs and fresh herbs, Nellie stepped out onto the cobbled streets of the Old Quarter. Today, she planned to visit the French Quarter, a neighborhood she had heard described as a blend of Hanoi's colonial past and modern charm. As she wandered, a familiar voice called out behind her. "Good morning, Nellie." She turned to see On, her basket of flowers noticeably emptier than the day before. "Good morning, On. How's business today?" "Better than usual. Everyone loves chrysanthemums this time of year," On said with a laugh. "Are you heading somewhere special?" "I'm going to explore the French Quarter," Nellie replied. "Would you like to join me?" On looked surprised but pleased. "I'd love to. It's one of my favorite parts of the city." The pair walked south, the bustling Old Quarter gradually giving way to wide boulevards lined with grand colonial buildings. The air seemed calmer here, and the rhythmic clacking of bicycles replaced the roar of motorbikes. On pointed to an elegant building with cream-colored walls and arched windows. "That's the Hanoi Opera House," she said. "It was built during the French colonial period, inspired by the Palais Garnier in Paris." Nellie stopped to admire the building. Its stately columns and intricate details exuded an old-world elegance that made her want to step inside. "Is it open to visitors?" she asked. "Yes," On replied. "They sometimes offer guided tours, or you can attend a performance. The acoustics inside are amazing." Curiosity piqued, Nellie decided to explore the interior. The receptionist welcomed them warmly and handed them tickets for a midday tour. Inside, the opera house was even more stunning than Nellie had imagined. Ornate chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and every surface gleamed with polished wood and gilded accents. "People here say it's not just a place for music," On explained as they wandered through the grand foyer. "It's a symbol of how art can bring people together, even during difficult times." As they entered the main auditorium, Nellie closed her eyes for a moment and imagined the room filled with music, the soft whispers of an audience before the first note. The space felt alive, almost sacred. After the tour, On suggested lunch at a nearby bistro, where Nellie tried her first bowl of bun cha, grilled pork patties served with rice noodles, fresh herbs, and a tangy dipping sauce. "This is one of Hanoi's specialties," On said as Nellie savored each bite. "It's simple, but the flavors are unforgettable." The bistro was small but charming, its walls decorated with old photographs of Hanoi from the early 1900s. Nellie studied one particular image of the opera house surrounded by people in traditional ao dye, the long tunics that flowed gracefully over their trousers. She imagined what it might have been like to walk these streets a century ago. "You seem lost in thought," On said, breaking the silence. "I'm just imagining the lives of the people who lived here when this was all new," Nellie replied. "Their stories, their struggles. It's fascinating." On nodded. "Hanoi is a city of layers. Every building, every street has its own history. That's why I love it so much." After lunch, they continued their walk, stopping to admire the Sofitel Legend Metropole Hotel. On explained that the hotel, built in 1901, was one of the city's most iconic landmarks. During the Vietnam War, they built a bomb shelter underneath it to protect guests, she said. "It's still there, and you can take a tour if you're interested." Nellie filed the detail away for later, her writer's mind already buzzing with ideas. As they strolled further, they passed elegant boutiques, art galleries, and cafes with tables spilling onto the sidewalks. The French Quarter felt like a different world compared to the frenetic energy of the Old Quarter, yet it was undeniably Hanoi. By mid-afternoon, they reached the National Museum of Vietnamese History, housed in another grand colonial building. Nellie was drawn to the museum's collection of artifacts, delicate ceramics, ancient tools, and intricately carved wooden statues. One exhibit featured traditional clothing from Vietnam's many ethnic groups, their vibrant patterns and rich textures telling stories of the country's diversity. On paused beside a display of old manuscripts and turned to Nellie. "You said you're a writer. Do you find inspiration in places like this?" "Absolutely," Nellie said. "Every object, every story here could be the start of a new idea. It's like a treasure chest for the imagination." On smiled. "Then you've come to the right city." As the sun began to dip low in the sky, painting the buildings with a warm, golden hue, Nellie and On found themselves back near the Opera House. On pointed to a small cafe with outdoor seating. "That's one of my favorite spots for an evening coffee." They settled at a table under a canopy of trees, the chatter of other patrons blending with the soft clink of glasses. Nellie ordered a black coffee, savoring its strong, rich flavor as she watched the world go by. "You've shown me so much today," she said to On. "Thank you." "It's my pleasure," On replied. "But I feel like Hanoi has only just begun to reveal itself to you. There's so much more to see." Nellie smiled, already feeling the pull of the city's hidden depths. As they parted ways for the evening, she walked back to her hotel, the streets glowing softly under the streetlights. She felt tired, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that came from a day filled with wonder and discovery. Back in her room, she opened her notebook again. Her hand moved across the page, capturing the elegance of the French Quarter, the taste of bun cha, and the stories Anne had shared. The words came easily, as if Hanoi itself were whispering them to her. Chapter 3. Nellie woke early to the soft call of birds outside her window. The streets of Hanoi were already stirring, and the sounds of vendors setting up their stalls and the faint buzz of motorbikes carried through the air. Today, she planned to visit the Ba Dinh district, home to some of Hanoi's most significant landmarks. She had arranged to meet Anne again, who had promised to guide her through the area's historical treasures. When Nellie arrived at their meeting spot near the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum, she found Anne waiting with 2 cups of steaming tea. "Good morning," Anne greeted, handing Nellie one of the cups. "Ready for another adventure?" "Always," Nellie replied, taking a sip of the fragrant tea. It warmed her hands and carried a subtle hint of jasmine. Anne gestured toward the imposing gray structure ahead of them. "This is where we begin, at the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum. It's a sacred place for Vietnamese people." The mausoleum loomed large, its austere design a stark contrast to the lush green gardens surrounding it. Anne explained that it housed the embalmed body of Ho Chi Minh, the revolutionary leader who had played a pivotal role in Vietnam's fight for independence. As they walked closer, Nellie noticed how quiet the area was despite the number of visitors. Groups of people moved in respectful silence, many bowing their heads as they approached the entrance. "Uncle Ho, as we call him, wanted a simple cremation," Anne said softly as they joined the line to enter. "But the people built this mausoleum to honor him. It's a symbol of their gratitude and respect." Inside, the atmosphere was solemn. Nellie followed the line of visitors through the dimly lit chamber, where Ho Chi Minh's body lay encased in glass. His serene expression and the meticulous care of the surroundings left an impression on her, a reminder of how one person's vision could shape the destiny of an entire nation. After leaving the mausoleum, Anne led her through the surrounding gardens toward the presidential palace. Its mustard yellow facade stood out vividly against the greenery, a relic of French colonial architecture repurposed for a new era. Nearby was a modest wooden stilt house, where Ho Chi Minh had lived during his leadership. He preferred simplicity, Anne said, pointing to the house's small, tidy rooms. He believed in serving the people, not living above them. Nellie admired the quiet humility of the place. "It's refreshing to see a leader who truly lived by their principles," she said. Next, they visited the Temple of Literature, a short ride away. As they entered the temple complex, Nellie was struck by the serenity of the space. 5 courtyards stretched out before them, each more beautiful than the last. Manicured gardens surrounded lotus ponds, and stone steels mounted on turtle-shaped pedestals bore the names of scholars who had passed the imperial exam centuries ago. This was Vietnam's first university, dedicated to Confucius, Anne explained as they walked. "It's a symbol of our country's reverence for education and wisdom." Nellie paused to take in the intricately carved woodwork and the soft murmur of the breeze rustling through the trees. "It's incredible to think of how many minds have been shaped here," she said. "The stories these walls could tell." On led her to the final courtyard, where a shrine to Confucius stood. People were lighting incense and bowing their heads in prayer. "Many students come here before exams to pray for success," On said. "It's a tradition." Nellie smiled, touched by the blend of history and living culture. She took out her notebook and jotted down a few lines about the sacred balance of intellect and faith. These moments, she realized, were what made Hanoi so special, a city where the past was not just preserved but actively woven into the fabric of daily life. By midday, they decided to break for lunch at a small family-run restaurant nearby. On recommended Nam Ran, crispy fried spring rolls filled with minced pork and vegetables. Nellie found them utterly delicious, the crisp exterior giving way to a flavorful filling with every bite. As they ate, On shared more stories about growing up in Hanoi. "When I was a child, my grandfather used to bring me to the Temple of Literature," she said. "He would tell me about the scholars and their dedication. It inspired me to study hard." "Did you ever want to become a scholar yourself?" Nellie asked. On laughed. "Not quite. But I've always loved learning, which is why I enjoy guiding visitors like you. Every tour feels like a chance to share what I've learned and to hear new perspectives." Nellie nodded, appreciating On's enthusiasm. "You've been an amazing guide," she said. "I don't think I would have understood half as much about this city without you." After lunch, they made one final stop at the One-Pillar Pagoda, a small yet striking structure built on a single stone pillar rising out of a lotus pond. On explained its symbolic significance. The lotus, a sacred flower in Buddhism, represented purity and enlightenment. "This pagoda is a tribute to a dream," On said. "The emperor who built it had a vision of the goddess of mercy handing him a lotus flower. He constructed this pagoda as a way to honor her." Nellie marveled at how even the smallest details in Hanoi seemed imbued with meaning. She stood by the pond for a while, watching the water ripple gently around the pagoda's reflection. There was a tranquility here that reminded her of the stories she loved most, those that lingered long after the final word was read. As the day came to an end, Nellie and On walked back toward the main road. The golden light of the setting sun cast long shadows over the city's landmarks, and Nellie felt a deep sense of gratitude for the day's experiences. "Thank you for sharing all of this with me," Nellie said. "I feel like I've walked through the heart of Hanoi today." On smiled. "The heart of Hanoi beats strongest in its people, but the places we've seen today are its soul." Back at her hotel that evening, Nellie sat by the window with her notebook. The page filled quickly with descriptions of the mausoleum's solemnity, the elegance of the presidential palace, and the quiet wisdom of the Temple of Literature. Her thoughts flowed like the Red River, carrying her closer to the story she hoped to write. Chapter 4. The morning greeted Nellie with a gentle mist that softened the outlines of Hanoi's buildings. Today's destination was West Lake, or Tay Ho as the locals called it, a sprawling body of water surrounded by temples, gardens, and cafes. Nellie had read about the tranquil beauty of this area and felt eager to experience its calm, reflective atmosphere. As she approached the lake, a cool breeze carried the scent of water lilies and distant incense. She found on waiting for her near Tran Quoc Pagoda, the oldest Buddhist temple in Hanoi, its red tower rising elegantly against the pale sky. "Good morning, Nellie," An called, her bright smile cutting through the fog. "You're just in time. The pagoda is especially peaceful this early." Nellie joined her, and they entered the temple grounds. The pagoda itself stood on a small islet connected to the mainland by a stone bridge. Its 11 tiers, each adorned with miniature Buddha statues, rose like a prayer reaching for the heavens. Around them, lush gardens framed the tranquil scene. This pagoda was built during the reign of Emperor Lai Namda in the 6th century, An explained as they walked. "It's been renovated many times, but its spiritual essence remains the same." Nellie paused to admire the statues of Buddha inside the main sanctuary. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood from the incense burning at the altar, and she could hear the soft chanting of a monk in a nearby chamber. A sense of profound calm washed over her. "Do you practice Buddhism?" Nellie asked An as they exited the sanctuary. An nodded thoughtfully. "I grew up in a Buddhist family, so the teachings are part of my life. But for me, it's more about finding balance and mindfulness in the everyday." They walked to the edge of the lake, where the reflection of the pagoda shimmered on the water. Nellie thought about An's words and how they resonated with her own struggles to find inspiration. Perhaps she, too, needed balance, a way to connect the chaos of her thoughts to something steady and grounding. After leaving the pagoda, they strolled along the lakeside path, lined with weeping willows that swayed gently in the breeze. An pointed out the palatial villas and trendy cafes that had sprung up in recent years. "Westlake has changed a lot," she said. "It used to be quieter, but now it's a mix of the old and the new." They stopped at a small cafe with a terrace overlooking the water. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Lan, welcomed them warmly. An introduced her as a former journalist who now ran the cafe as a way to share her love of Vietnamese culture with visitors. "What brings you to Westlake today?" Lan asked as she served them cups of tea. "Nellie is a writer," An replied. "She's exploring Hanoi for inspiration." Lan's eyes lit up. "A writer? Then you've come to the right place. Westlake has inspired poets and artists for centuries." Over tea, Lan shared stories about the lake's history, including its connection to ancient legends. "They say this lake was once part of the Red River," she said. "There are many myths about how it came to be, but my favorite is the story of the dragon." Nellie leaned forward, intrigued. "Tell me more." Lan smiled. "It's said that a dragon flew over this area, and its tail swept the land, creating the lake. That's why Vietnam is often called the land of the dragon." As Lan spoke, Nellie imagined the dragon soaring through the sky, its shimmering scales reflecting the sun. It was the kind of image that could anchor an entire chapter of her novel. After finishing their tea, On suggested renting bicycles to explore the rest of the lake. The ride was leisurely, the path winding through quiet neighborhoods and lush gardens. They passed the Quang Ba flower market, where vendors arranged blooms in brilliant shades of red, pink, and yellow. They stopped at a small shrine nestled among the trees. "This is the Taeho Temple," On said. "It's dedicated to the Mother Goddess, a figure deeply rooted in Vietnamese spiritual traditions." The temple exuded an air of quiet strength. Inside, offerings of fruit, flowers, and incense surrounded the statues of the Mother Goddess and her attendants. An explained that the temple was a place where people sought guidance and protection. "Do you have temples like this where you come from?" An asked. "Not quite," Nellie replied. "But we have places of reflection, libraries, museums, even natural spaces. They're different, but I think they serve a similar purpose." An smiled. "It's interesting how every culture finds its own way to connect with something greater." As the afternoon wore on, they returned their bicycles and found a lakeside restaurant for lunch. The menu featured cha sie, a dish of turmeric-marinated fish cooked with fresh dill and served with noodles. An insisted it was a must-try, and Nellie wasn't disappointed. The flavors were bold yet harmonious, much like the city itself. They lingered at the restaurant, talking about everything from Vietnamese folklore to Nellie's struggles with writer's block. An listened patiently, her perspective offering Nellie a new way to think about her work. "Maybe the story you're looking for isn't something you find," An said. "Maybe it's something that finds you." Nellie considered this as she gazed out at the lake, its surface now glittering in the late afternoon sun. Perhaps An was right. Perhaps the inspiration she sought was already there, waiting for her to notice it. As they walked back toward the main road, the light began to shift, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. A group of children played by the water, their laughter mingling with the soft rustle of the trees. Nellie felt a deep sense of contentment, as if the lake itself had whispered something she couldn't quite put into words. That evening, back in her hotel room, she opened her notebook and began to write. The words came easily, flowing like the waters of West Lake. She wrote about the pagoda and the temple, the dragon's tail and the Mother Goddess, and the quiet wisdom she had found in An's companionship. For the first time in a long time, Nellie felt like her story was starting to take shape. Chapter 5. Nellie awoke to a bright morning, the mist of the previous day replaced by clear skies. Today's plan was one she had been especially eager for, a visit to Hanoi's train street. The iconic strip where train tracks ran precariously close to houses and cafes had become a symbol of the city's vibrant, unpredictable charm. An had arranged to meet her at a small cafe known for its views of the passing trains. The walk to Train Street took Nellie through winding alleys, each one revealing glimpses of everyday life, a grandmother hanging laundry, a child chasing a stray cat, and vendors arranging their wares. She arrived at the meeting spot just as An waved her over to a shaded table on the narrow sidewalk. "Perfect timing," An said with a grin. "The train comes through in about 30 minutes. Until then, we have time for some coffee." Nellie glanced around, taking in the unique setting. The train tracks cut through the middle of a lively residential street, flanked by low-rise buildings painted in fading hues of blue, yellow, and green. Above, lines of drying clothes crisscrossed like banners in a festival. Lon, the cafe owner Nellie had met at Westlake, emerged from the small counter with 2 cups of egg coffee. "Welcome back," she said, placing the drinks on the table. "You're in for a treat today. Train Street is always an adventure." Nellie took a sip of the frothy coffee, the rich sweetness instantly lifting her spirits. "I've never seen anything like this," she said. "Do people really live this close to the tracks?" An nodded. "For many families, these homes have been here for generations. They've adapted their lives to the train schedule. When it's time for the train, everything moves: tables, chairs, laundry. And once it passes, life goes back to normal." As the time for the train drew near, the atmosphere grew electric. Vendors cleared their displays, children were called inside, and cafe owners folded tables closer to the walls. An led Nellie to a safer vantage point near the edge of the street. The rumble began softly, a vibration that seemed to rise from the ground itself. Within moments, the train appeared, its horn blaring as it barreled down the narrow track. Nellie's breath caught as it passed just feet away, its steel body gleaming in the sunlight. The sound was deafening, but the sight was exhilarating, a snapshot of raw energy and precision. When the train was gone, the street burst back to life as if nothing had happened. Vendors returned their wares, customers reclaimed their tables, and laughter rippled through the air. Nellie found herself smiling, swept up in the resilience and resourcefulness of the people who called this place home. "You don't see that every day," she said to An as they returned to their table. An laughed. "It's uniquely Hanoi, isn't it?" They spent the rest of the morning exploring the surrounding area. An introduced Nellie to some of the locals, who welcomed her with easy smiles and stories. One elderly man, Mr. Hoa, invited them into his home, a narrow structure that hugged the tracks. "This house has been in my family for 70 years, Mr. Hoa said proudly, showing them faded black and white photos on the wall. "The train used to be slower, you know. We didn't have so many people coming to see it back then." "What do you think of all the visitors now?" Nellie asked. Mr. Hoa chuckled. "It's strange, but I like it. People come from so far away to see how we live. It makes me proud to share our way of life." As they left Mr. Hoa's home, Nellie felt a pang of admiration for the quiet strength of the people here. Their lives, though shaped by the train schedule, were full of joy and community. For lunch, An brought her to a small eatery nearby that served bong quan, delicate rice rolls stuffed with minced pork and mushrooms. The rolls were topped with crispy shallots and served with a side of fish sauce for dipping. Nellie marveled at how something so simple could taste so extraordinary. "Cooking here is like an art form," she said, savoring another bite. "Every dish has so much thought and care behind it." An nodded. "Food is a big part of our culture. It's not just about eating, it's about sharing and connecting with others." After their meal, they returned to Train Street for one last coffee. Lon joined them this time, eager to hear about Nellie's impressions of the city. They talked about Hanoi's contrasts, its blend of old and new, its serene lakes and bustling streets, its quiet temples and lively markets. "You're collecting so many stories," Lon said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Have you started writing yet?" "I have," Nellie replied. "But I think the story is still finding its shape. Hanoi is giving me so much to work with." Lon smiled knowingly. "That's the beauty of this city. It doesn't reveal itself all at once. You have to listen closely." As the afternoon wore on, Nellie and Ann said their goodbyes to Lon and began the walk back to the old quarter. The streets were alive with the sounds of vendors calling out their wares and the occasional notes of a busker's guitar. Nellie felt a deep sense of gratitude for the day, for the people she had met, and for the way Hanoi seemed to open its heart to her at every turn. That evening, as she sat in her hotel room, the memory of Train Street lingered vividly in her mind. She opened her notebook and began to write about the rumble of the train, the resilience of Mr. Hoa, and the way life danced so closely with danger here. The words flowed effortlessly, carrying her deeper into the story she was discovering. Chapter 6. The sun was just peeking over the horizon when Nellie made her way to the meeting point Ann had suggested. Today, they were venturing beyond the city's bustling streets to explore Hanoi's traditional craft villages, starting with Bat Trang, the renowned ceramic village. Ann had arranged for a motorbike taxi to take them there, and the cool morning air carried a sense of excitement as Nellie climbed onto the back of the vehicle. The ride to Bat Trang was a sensory journey. The city gradually gave way to the countryside, where the Red River meandered lazily alongside the road. The air smelled fresher here, tinged with the earthy scent of wet clay from the workshops that dotted the village outskirts. When they arrived, the narrow lanes of Bat Trang unfolded before them, lined with shops displaying rows of gleaming ceramics. Ann led Nellie to a workshop where a potter named Long was waiting. His hands were coated with gray clay, and his apron bore the marks of countless creations. "Welcome to my workshop," Long said, his voice calm and steady. "Are you ready to try your hand at pottery?" Nellie smiled nervously. "I've never done this before, but I'd love to learn." Long guided her to a potter's wheel and began by demonstrating how to shape a simple bowl. His hands moved with practiced ease, coaxing the clay into form as if it were an extension of himself. Then it was Nellie's turn. She hesitated as the wheel began to spin, unsure of where to place her hands. "Relax," Long said. "The clay will follow your lead if you let it." Taking a deep breath, Nellie pressed her hands gently against the wet clay. It wobbled at first, but under Long's guidance, it slowly began to take shape. By the time she finished, the bowl was far from perfect, but she felt a quiet pride in what she had made. "It's harder than it looks," she said, laughing as she wiped the clay from her hands. Long nodded. "Pottery teaches patience. Every piece has its imperfections, but that's what makes it unique. Just like people." As the bowl was set aside to dry, Long showed her around the workshop. Shelves were lined with vases, teapots, and plates, each one painted with intricate designs. An explained that Bat-Trink ceramics had been traded for centuries, valued for their beauty and durability. Before leaving the village, Nellie picked out a small ceramic tea set as a souvenir. The delicate blue and white pattern reminded her of the calm she had felt while shaping the clay, a memory she wanted to carry home. Their next stop was Van Phuc, the silk village. The road there was lined with mulberry trees, their leaves fluttering in the breeze. As they entered the village, the rhythmic clatter of wooden looms filled the air. On led Nellie to a workshop where an elderly woman named Mrs. Ha was weaving a length of silk. "This is Van Phuc silk," On said. "It's famous for its softness and durability. In the past, it was used to make clothing for royalty." Mrs. Ha invited Nellie to try weaving. She showed her how to press the foot pedals and guide the shuttle through the threads. The process was mesmerizing, each movement building on the last to create something beautiful. "It's like writing," Nellie said as she worked. "Every thread is like a word, and together they create a story." Mrs. Ha smiled. "That's a lovely way to put it. Silk weaving is an art, just like your writing. It takes care and attention." After a while, Mrs. Ha showed them her finished pieces, scarves, dresses, and rolls of fabric shimmering in the sunlight. Nellie couldn't resist buying a scarf, its deep crimson color reminding her of the bridges in Hanoi's old quarter. By late afternoon, they returned to the city, where An suggested they take a cooking class to round out the day. They arrived at a cozy kitchen tucked away in a quiet alley, where a chef named Mr. Din greeted them. The menu for the class was simple but quintessentially Vietnamese: spring rolls and pho. Under Mr. Din's watchful eye, Nellie learned to wrap spring rolls with precision, folding the delicate rice paper around a filling of minced pork, shrimp, and vegetables. The pho was a more elaborate process, requiring careful preparation of the broth, herbs, and noodles. By the time the dishes were ready, the kitchen was filled with the warm, comforting aroma of home-cooked food. Sitting down to eat, Nellie felt a sense of accomplishment. The flavors of the meal were richer for the effort she had put into making it, and she savored every bite. Cooking, like pottery or weaving, is about creating something with your hands, An said as they ate. It's another way to connect with the world around you. Nellie nodded, reflecting on the day's experiences. Each craft she had tried had taught her something, not just about the people of Hanoi, but about herself. There was a quiet joy in creating, in being part of a tradition that stretched back through generations. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the city, Nellie and An parted ways. Back at her hotel, Nellie carefully unpacked her souvenirs: the tea set, the silk scarf, and a small bundle of spring rolls she had saved for a midnight snack. Each item felt like a piece of the story she was beginning to write. Opening her notebook, she described the soft hum of the potter's wheel, the rhythm of the loom, and the fragrant steam rising from the pho. Her words captured the essence of creation, the way it connected her to Hanoi's past, present, and future. That night, as she drifted off to sleep, Her dreams were filled with spinning clay, shimmering silk, and the gentle laughter of the people she had met along the way. Chapter 7. Nellie awoke with a sense of both anticipation and melancholy. It was her last full day in Hanoi, and though her time in the city had been transformative, the thought of leaving felt bittersweet. She planned to end her journey with an evening at the Thang Long Water Puppet Theater, a performance she had heard described as both enchanting and deeply rooted in Vietnam's cultural traditions. The morning was unhurried. Nellie wandered through the old quarter one final time, taking in the sights and sounds with the kind of attention that only came when one knew a moment was fleeting. She stopped at a vendor's cart for a banh mi and ate it while sitting on a bench near Hong Kim Lake, watching the ripples of water shimmer under the late morning sun. By early afternoon, she met On near Dong Xian Market. On had offered to take her on a cyclo tour, a leisurely way to see the city one last time. The cyclo driver, Nguyen, greeted them with a warm smile and gestured to the cushioned seat of his vehicle. "Welcome, Miss Nellie," Nguyen said as he helped her settle in. "Today, we will ride through the heart of Hanoi." The cyclo moved at a gentle pace, allowing Nellie to soak in every detail. They passed through bustling streets where vendors called out their wares and children darted between motorbikes. Nguyen shared stories along the way, pointing out hidden corners of the city that she might have otherwise missed. "This alley," he said, gesturing to a narrow lane lined with faded murals, "is where artists gather to paint during the Tet holiday. Every year, the walls are filled with new creations." Further along, they passed the Long Bien Bridge, its steel frame gleaming in the sunlight. "Designed by Gustave Eiffel," Nguyen said, his tone proud. "It stood strong even during wartime. Many people see it as a symbol of Hanoi's resilience." The tour ended at a quiet cafe near West Lake, where On and Nguyen joined Nellie for tea. As they sipped the fragrant brew, Nellie expressed her gratitude. "You've shown me so much of Hanoi," she said. "I feel like I've been given more than just a tour. I've been given stories." Nguyen smiled. "That is the magic of Hanoi. It is not just a place, it is a feeling." As evening approached, On escorted Nellie to the Thang Long Water Puppet Theater. The small, unassuming building was packed with visitors, all eager to witness this traditional art form. On explained that water puppetry had originated in the rice paddies of northern Vietnam, where farmers used flooded fields as stages to entertain their communities. Inside the theater, the stage was a shallow pool of water, framed by a backdrop of painted scenery. Musicians sat on either side, their instruments ready to bring the performance to life. The lights dimmed, and the show began. Nellie watched, spellbound, as the wooden puppets danced across the water. They depicted scenes of village life, fishing, farming, and festivals, as well as tales of mythical creatures and heroic deeds. The puppeteers, hidden behind a screen, manipulated the figures with skill and precision, their movements accompanied by the lively rhythms of traditional Vietnamese music. One scene in particular captured Nellie's imagination, a golden dragon spiraling across the water, its body undulating in time with the music. It was a vision of grace and power, a reminder of the legends On and Lon had shared with her. As the final notes of the performance echoed through the theater, the audience erupted in applause. Nellie turned to On, her face alight with wonder. "That was extraordinary," she said. "It felt like stepping into a story." On nodded. "Water puppetry is more than entertainment. It's a way of preserving our history, of keeping our stories alive." Outside the theater, the streets of the old quarter were alive with their own kind of performance. Lanterns glowed softly in shop windows, and the hum of conversation filled the air. Nellie and On walked together for a while, the quiet warmth of their friendship wrapping around them like a favorite scarf. Finally, they reached the hotel where Nellie was staying. On hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I'm going to miss showing you around, Nellie. You've reminded me of why I love this city so much." "And I'll miss being here," Nellie replied. "But I feel like Hanoi will always stay with me." They embraced briefly, and On waved goodbye as Nellie disappeared into the lobby. Back in her room, Nellie unpacked her notebook and began to write. She wrote about the Golden Dragon, the puppeteer's artistry, and the way Hanoi had revealed itself to her, piece by piece. Her words flowed effortlessly, capturing not just the sights and sounds of the city, but its essence, the way it pulsed with life, carrying its history and spirit into the present. When she finally set her pen down, Nellie felt a deep sense of peace. The story she had been searching for had found her after all. It wasn't just in the landmarks or the legends, but in the people she had met and the moments they had shared. As she climbed into bed, her mind drifted back to the golden dragon on the water, its shimmering form a symbol of transformation and renewal. Sleep came quickly, carrying her into dreams where the streets of Hanoi unfolded endlessly, inviting her to explore just a little further. And with that, Nellie's journey in Hanoi reaches its peaceful conclusion. The end.